Greetings, this is the GETTO Free Press. I'm George Boston Rhynes. I'm in Valdosta, Georgia. And I'm at Serenity Church where Senior Servant Floyd Rose is in control. And we have a gentleman here who have accused me of being late for this meeting, and I'm guilty. But we're going to try to fix it and make it up to you by providing you with information that can help save you, your children, and coming generations, just by doing something as simple as helping to clean up our environment. What's your name, my beautiful brother?
Gerald Durley, D-U-R-L-E-Y.
Okay.
Nice to Emeritus from Atlanta, Georgia, 25 years at Providence Missionary Baptist Church.
Okay, nice to meet you, my beautiful
Certainly
brother.
nice meeting you.
You was at VSU, I understand, last night. And a few
right.
minutes ago, you was over to, what's the name of that church?
Christ the King Episcopal Church.
Yes, with Lee Touchton.
Right.
And what's your name, my beautiful brother? And say more about this facility here at the museum.
Floyd Rose. This is Serenity Christian Church, and of course we have an African American museum housed in this complex.
My beautiful brother, you gave such a beautiful lecture this morning. I just want you to tell us why you're here. First of all, who called you here?
Jackie Patterson, who's with the Environmental Agency of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, she had talked to Brother Rose here and also Lee Touchstone, who's here in Atlanta. He was here in Valdosta. And we're very much concerned about the environmental conditions that are disproportionately negatively impacting all the world and all people, but in specifically the African American people whom we're called to serve. So she asked me would I come down and speak to a group called SAVE, Student Against Violating the Environment, and the Religion and Philosophy Department joined in with them to come down and talk about the issues surrounding environmental injustices and also climate change. So I decided, and I came down last night, spoke to a group of students and faculty members and people from the faith community, and then this morning, small one. So that's why I came.
Okay, would you just start out in your own way and share with us some of the material that you spoke of a few minutes ago? I'm going to sit back and be educated with the information that you have. I know it's all good. Valdosta is a community that really needs your help because we understand that our water here is not so clean. And so we're talking about the air that we breathe, and I believe that even our environment has something to do with maybe the way our children think and the way they do certain things. Tell us a little bit about what you got there for us.
Well, first of all, I think it's very incumbent for us to recognize and realize that the God created a perfectly balanced world. The ants appreciated the plants, the bees were an integral part of what we do. Human beings, we were called to be servants on this particular planet that God created. But what happened, we got into it, and I think we wanted a much more comfortable life, which I have no problem with, and we began to come up with new ways of doing things for comfortability of living, and it became a part of, in terms of, well, when it got hot, we wanted to cool off. When it was cool, we wanted to warm up. So we got into energy, and we began to create a lot of things that were not necessarily under God's dominion. And I think that it has been good, so I don't knock that. But what happened, the greed and the money got so involved now that we began to keep the energy going, so much so that we went into fossil burning fuel. So we began to dig more coal mines, and when we began to dig more coal mines, we had to go into deforestation, in other words, taking down so many of the trees. So then we had a carbon footprint that was beginning to be created. We call that, so that was done, and we were very much concerned about it. Those of us in the African American churches, of course, we were more concerned about issues that were directly impacting us. Crime and violence and unjust laws, voting, HIV and other kinds of things. So we did not get on the bandwagon with this environmental devastation that was disproportionately negatively impacting us. So recently we began to understand that we must now speak out boldly about what we're doing to the environment, because health-wise our children are suffering from asthma. When there's a major catastrophe such as Katrina, Sandy Hook and others, billions of dollars are lost, and when billions of dollars are lost, it's usually a lot of times in our community. So therefore, we've got to be concerned about the kinds of things that are destroying our community. We still haven't recovered for just New Orleans alone.
Yeah, excuse me, let me interject here. Some people are saying that the climate change is a total farce. There's no basics for it. They say that somebody's just doing it to enhance the Democratic Party. What do you say?
Well, I don't think that. Well, I don't think that this is a political issue so much, and I don't think that this is a political issue. I think this is a real issue. I don't know how you enhance a political party when it's freezing cold in Atlanta and hot in Montana. That's a real issue. When you've got hurricanes and when you've got tornadoes, those are not political issues. Those are real issues that transcend color, race, gender, economic status, and our educational position. These are not political issues. These are real issues. Now, that's not to deny the fact that politicians and our business people do not use certain things to portray their particular position. But these are not political issues. These are real issues. When you see what's going on in Alaska with the polar bears not being able to reach other glaciers, when you see that now fish are being disoriented around the coast, when you see that the marshlands are being destroyed throughout the South around areas, these are very real issues. Now, when issues that are real come about, they can be politicized, and that's real. So we've got to understand and go to look deeply into what the issues are and what is creating those issues. The scientists around the world, over 120 scientists from all over the world, have already said that because we're putting so much carbon dioxide in the air, that is creating an imbalance in the nature, and we see that. So if the scientists are saying that, and those of us in the faith community have an obligation to begin to speak to a perfectly balanced world that we are called to be stewards of, then we're poor stewards. How are we poor stewards? We're poor stewards because now we're more concerned about profits rather than people. And that's why we've got to now come together with the scientific and the faith community and begin to pressure the politicians to begin to look at the kinds of emissions that are going on through the EPA in terms of cars, in terms of energy efficiency programs, in terms of sustainability in our climate. This is a real issue now that has been, to some degree, politicized. There are those that might say on the far, and I'll say at the far right wing of the faith community, that say, this is God's doing. But a lot of times, isn't it interesting how we get in and we put our own footprint on and we blame God? When you go around the curve doing 50 miles an hour and you know you can only take it at 20, you can say it's God's will that you crashed your car, or was it your responsibility to slow down and take that curve at the right time? I think right now we need to slow down and begin to take control of the elements in our environment that are negatively destroying us. And that's what we came to share with young people so that they can join in forces with the civil rights movement. When I started with the civil rights movement, it was a grassroots initiative. They said, you'll never vote. They said, you'll never move to the front of the bus. And all of these were the kinds of accusations. But when people come together under the guidance of an almighty God that's so good, that gives you wisdom, that gives you insight, that gives you courage, that gives you determination, that can focus you to move ahead, then and only then can people come together from the scientific community, the political community, the economic community, the faith community, and the education community. When those five areas come together, then we can begin to make a difference. And I think that's what this is all about. It's at the grassroots level now. Heretofore, the whole environmental movement, climate change, creation care, these were words that were talked about. But now, when you look at the real issues that are negatively impacting us, in terms of weather, in terms of health, in terms of economic, $100 billion just from all of the devastation that has occurred because of climate change. When you look now in China, where they're starting to close the coal mines there because it's impacting California now. And this is something that we come together all across the world that we've got to do. It is an awareness, it's an education program, and then we can move toward action.
Speaking of awareness, what made you become aware? I know you talked about your spirituality, but what made you get involved in this movement wherein there are a lot of men of the cloth, in all religions, in fact, just ignore what, apparently you take so...
Well, being an African-American pastor, see, I don't attend a black church because there's no such thing as a black church. There's a church with black people in it. There's only one church. So I'm an African-American pastor that pastors in a church where black folks attend. There's only one church. and that church was founded and created by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So I don't get into all of that. But I am concerned as a black pastor who ministered to African Americans, what has happened to our lives in terms of 7 different areas, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of economics, in terms of unemployment. These are areas that we are at the lower end of the scale. Now we're at the lower end of the scale for racism and other kinds of isms that has held us back, discrimination patterns. So what we've got to do now is become educated in this, but it's hard to become educated when you're not feeling well, when you're sick. And I began to look at what are some of the things that are causing our sicknesses, some of the foods that we're eating that are now grown in soil that has already been contaminated because of much of the fracking that we don't understand that's going on in the climate. Much of the toxic water and toxic air that's impacting the fuel, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink. These are all impurities that are coming into a body that was initially created by God that made it all. Sure, we're going to have broken legs and diseases will come, so you can't avoid those things, and death is imminent. But there are things that we're contributing to it, what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe. And I start seeing the connection between that, and we have a moral obligation. We have a moral obligation to make a difference. Otherwise, we sit back and we're not planning for the future generation, but for the now generation. And what better place that can this message go forth than from the houses of worship, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews. I have a sheet of paper here that talks about greening spaces, the Baha'i faith, the Buddhists. The Buddhists say, cut down the forest of desire, not the forest of trees. Confucianism, does heaven say anything? The 4 seasons pursue their courses, and all things are continuously being produced. Does heaven say anything? Hinduism, I am the fragrance of the earth, the heat and fire. I am the life of all lives. And when you look at Islam, have you not considered how Allah sets forth a parable of a good word being like a good tree whose roots is firm, whose branches are in heaven? That's Islam, and all throughout. Even the natives, oh great spirit, help us learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and every rock. And I could go into Shintoism, Taoism. So it's all about us coming together. Now, when we of all the faiths and religions come together with the scientific world and impact the business world, understanding that it's just not about producing more products for more profits, for more bottom lines for the investors, then we have a chance to make a difference. I think we can all come together and have a win-win where faith and science can work together to show business how they can continue to make a profit and not destroy people.
Okay, you made a parallel earlier in your lecture at the church over there, and you talked about your experience of coming up in one denomination. You don't have to talk about that denomination, but many ministers cannot make that transitional process as you made to and I did the same thing. I thought that if you wasn't a holiness, you was going to hell. In Baptists, everybody going to hell except me, until I went through a Renaissance in Okinawa, Japan. So would you expound that a little bit? What changed you from your separate denomination to the bigger picture?
I think whatever changes anyone is exposure. All life is about exposure. It's what you're exposed to, it's what you become, part of your culture. Had I grown up in Saudi Arabia, I would be a Muslim. Had I grown up in Japan, I'd be a Buddhist. And that was my exposure. I grew up in America in a particular faith tradition that exposed me to something that was relatively myopic and small and narrow. But as I became exposed and began to see other people and hear other things, then I began to grow. I think now when it comes to the environment, many of us who are African American pastors, we have so many things that are present us each day that we don't have the desire to go into something that might be impending 20 to 50 years from now. We've got to deal with people who are going through issues of today. And so it's not that we're not concerned, it's not that we're not interested, it's that we're overworked and it's overwhelmed and we don't have all of the facts. We see the disparity, but we have other pressing issues. Once we begin to, and more African American pastors, as well as some white pastors, are becoming much more concerned about this, then we will see a major shift from the voting, from the political, from the encouraging. And then once that occurs, then you'll see business take a different look at it. Cars will begin to be produced differently. We're looking at more electric cars, and we're looking at more energy efficient cars. We're looking at how do we retrofit our places of faith now. But right now, if you go into a large congregation and you say to somebody, we're going to do an energy audit on your church, and then you tell them that your church is not energy efficient, you've got leaky windows and you've got roofs that have got holes in them, that constitutes, I've got to go out and work harder to get more money. It's not that I'm not concerned about the sustainability and my building not retrofitted, but I've got to now take on another dimension. So our hesitancy is the same hesitancy we had when HIV came about. HIV, we thought it was a gay white male disease. It didn't affect us. But soon as it started impacting the black community, you saw the involvement of the African American pulpit.
Okay, again, I want to reflect because some things I remember from the meeting, the lecture was so powerful. Would you reflect upon what you said about in the future you foresee the pastors going through a renaissance in terms mentally and with all the pressure?
Well, I think there are a lot of pressures in the world that not only impact ministers, but impact the people in general. I think the environment has a lot to do with this. I talked about road rage and how people are going off because of, it could be what they're breathing into the air, what they drank before they left, the impatience that we're having toward one another. So consequently, when people are facing these high levels of anxiety and apprehensions and fear and ignorance and just a feeling of hopelessness, they'll come to, in many instances, to their place of worship, be it the mosque or the synagogue or the church. And when you see that, here you've got this one person who is just a human being called to help people, called to serve people, called to give people hope. And so many times we as pastors are over inundated with those kinds of pressures. And unless we have the appropriate kind of outlet, speaking to people, sharing with people, working these things through prayer, through trusting in God, but talking to one another, the pressures going to become so pressing that we're going to find that a lot of times our own mental illness and our own psychological well-being will be challenged. And I said this morning that we're going to see more and more of that because the pressures are very real. We see it in every other business. We see it in the business world. We see it in the superintendencies of schools. We see it in the political world. But we always think that we can say, oh, Jesus will make a way. God will make a way. Jehovah Jireh is our answer. All praises be to Allah, Allah Akbar. And we can say these things, and we say these things, but how do they psychologically help us to get to the next level? That's going to be a challenge as the pressures become more and more increasingly.
Okay, I heard you speak also about a person that I have the greatest respect for, and people would try to make you feel bad because you associate with different denominations. But I heard you mention Louis Farrakhan this morning. So undoubtedly you have found out that we all have a little bit to contribute. Is that it?
I don't think anyone can be excluded. The truth is not isolated in one particular area. We all can contribute to this beautiful mosaic picture of truth. Minister Farrakhan, he contributes particularly when we started talking about self-help and how do we build our own farms and grow our own foods. Who can argue against that? The money in the black community circulates sometime one time. In other communities, it circulates 9 times. We've got to understand that economic paradigm that can contribute to us taking care of self. Now, one can condemn him because he said at one time he was a black Muslim, then he became a this. And we can put people into boxes. As I've said, I've been put into many boxes, and a lot of times people will put you into a box when they can't understand you, but if they can put you in a box, they can control you. I remember they put a man several years ago who they murdered at 39 years old. They put him in a box and called him just a civil rights leader when they didn't realize he was a minister of the gospel, he was a father, he was a very articulate individual, he was concerned about people. Martin Luther King was a visionary and a prophet of this time, but they put him in a box, and once they put him in a box, they killed him at 39 years of age. So I think that everybody contributes to this journey of truth and finding out where we need to go and how do we connect a deity that's greater than ourselves. So yes, I found a knowledge and basis of wisdom from many different faiths and many different languages, and we've learned so much just from, had it not been for the women in the African American church, I don't know if we'd still be alive.
Amen.
Because of their stability, because of their sustaining, because of really their faith that we can make it. Many of us are articulating that here we are, the paragon of masculinity up before people. But what we did to maintain our own level of self-esteem was sometimes to kill off those that were really giving us the strength. So I think now we're beginning to merge those two powerful forces, masculinity and femininity, to see what God is really doing. We're complementing each other, spelled with an E rather than an I.
Okay. There are about two other areas before we adjourn here that I want you to speak on, but I want to save the literature that you presented last. But what I want you to do right now that got my interest is tell me what school did you go to and what education did you receive over these years. It may not be important to some, but yet I think that really impressed me.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, because all too often we again put people in boxes when we hear them speaking. They say, well, you know, he's never been here and he's never been there. But I find that most people who have any degree of education, any degree of insight, they don't have to tell you where they've been or what they've gotten. They're just trying to articulate and share. But in my particular case, I grew up on the West Coast, born in Wichita, Kansas. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology from Tennessee State. I have a master's degree in psychology from Illinois. I have a PhD, a doctor's degree from the University of Massachusetts, and I have another master's degree from Howard University. The first three were in psychology. The last was in theology. So I combined the psychological along with the pneuma, the body, the mind, and the spirit, which allows me to understand these various disciplines, which brings you to your art. And I think the greatest lesson I've learned was I have a degree from Streetology University, where I understood what the streets were talking about, because Jesus was the type of person who stayed on the streets. He was pedestrian in nature. He was not up there with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. In fact, they were running him out. But he learned. It says, somebody told me he was 12 years old, went in and he taught even those who were learned. And they ran him out of town at 12 years old. And when he came back, he said, let me go on out into the streets. And by the time he prepared himself between 12 and 18, 12 and 30, he was really ready. Now from 12 to 18, I guess he was at some university. That was the University of Street. And then he came back and pulled it all together. And I think that's what I've tried to learn at my age now. I'll be 73 in May. And so consequently, all of that comes together now. And the key to any kind of education, how do I share it and how do I give it back?
Okay, earlier, this second to the last question. Earlier you spoke of, and this is something that's very dear to my heart, you spoke concerning the King family. And I think you said you had been with the daughter or something recently. How do you feel about that's going on, since you seem to have more information, not to put no negative shadows in?
No, it's not a negative shadow. I think that it's premature to even talk about that now, because it's a lot of discussion. What would suffice to say that this is a family. None of us have ever been in the position where your father was one of the most internationally known peace people in the world, and your mother kept on the legacy, and families inherit things. And I think that the children have done a marvelous job in working through all of that they've inherited. It's so easy from those of us who are on the outside to cast stones and dispersion. So I think it's good to understand that these young people are handling something that none of us have had to do, where your father is known in every part of the world, a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a counselor to president. So I think that they're doing a marvelous job as they're working these issues through at this particular juncture in time.
Now I come back and I join you because I really was so impressed with the literature that you have. Mm-hmm. So let me close this out, and then we'll just come back to and introduce a little bit of literature that you have.
Well, I think...
Just a minute, we'll come back. Thank you very much.